Welcome to another exciting episode of Kung Fu Conversations with your co-hosts Owen Schilling and myself, Randall Davis. Today, we're joined from the island, one of the islands of Hawaii, by Gunther Weil. Gunther, thank you so much for taking the time out to hang out with us. And I mean, you could be on the beach right now, but you're hanging out with your buddy Owen and myself about to talk some martial arts and some Kung Fu. So thank you for your time, my friend.
Happy to be here, and I'm only 5 minutes from the beach, so
perfect. You still got time.
There's still time. Yeah, and it's only like noon or 11 o'clock out there, so
yeah, we're 4 hours. We're 4 hours time with mountain time. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You got a full day ahead of you, brother. So,
Indeed.
Gunther, we ask a lot of people, and Owen was curious since you guys have known each other for a while, but maybe he doesn't necessarily know this. Tell us what got you interested in where did your martial journey begin, and what did that begin with?
Well, it's an interesting long story. I can't say specifically what the precipitating factors are that got me interested in it, but I think it's probably just kind of something that influenced me indirectly. Most of us who've gotten into this kind of area, kung fu movies and stories and comic books and things. But
sure.
I also think there's another element in terms of my interest, which is I have an interesting connection to the military. Particularly, spending so many years in Boulder, which is not a town that's really very supportive of
Sure.
military mentality. But
sure.
I've had friends over the years and so on, and a number of my teachers in the martial arts have been, including someone I believe you've been working with for a while too, Bing Lee in Denver. Mm-hmm. I worked with Ben for quite a few years. And his brother, actually, when I was living in the Aspen Valley. And Bing was an example. He had been a Green Beret, I believe, or Special Forces guy. And also, Mike Bingo, who was his partner for years, who was a legendary, guy. And so, and even here, living in Hawaii, I've connected with where I'm living here. We're close to a Marine base. And the neighborhood I'm in, there's a lot of military people and retired military. I have a neighbor next door who's to be soon retiring admiral. So I've had this connection into the martial military aspect, which I think was a factor. I don't want to get too woo-woo about it, but basically it may be a karmic element here. Just something that's has come through the ages. But my first exposure was when I was starting my graduate work at Harvard in 1960. I worked with George Mattson, who was the founder, actually, not the founder, but he was the first person to really bring, I believe, or the second person to bring Okinawan karate to the U.S. So I studied with him for a couple of years. So that was my introduction. And then from there, I started studying Aikido in Cambridge with Kanai Sensei, who was one of Uyeshiba's senior people.
Yeah.
That generation, they were tough guys. They didn't mess around. And I was already starting in my early 30s. I just couldn't handle the break falls. My back just couldn't handle it.
Sure.
So that's when I gravitated towards Tai Chi. But over the years, again, my teachers like Bing and some other people I've worked with, more or less, have had a very martial orientation. So that has been an element. I'm not a fighter. I mean, I've only once or twice been in a situation where or even the possibility of utilizing it came up. But it's not something, I'm not into mixed martial arts particularly, or that whole scene, so especially at this stage of my life, I'm going to be 89 in January.
So, bless you. You look great for 89, brother.
Yep.
Well, thanks to a lot of Qigong and Tai Chi and related things like nutrition and meditative practices and all kinds of things. And I would say my 3 marriages have all been really instrumental in helping maintain my inner life and my growth. So, it's like, I think at the end of the day, relationships are the kind of cauldron in which all the spiritual work gets tested, right? I mean, if not there, where, so that in the marketplace, if you will, So.
Well said.
So, and I've been attracted to, not only the martial scene, but the marketplace too, as you know, and I've been, I've never made a living doing martial arts. I've taught off and on, including the school in Boulder, Tai Chi school, I was instructor there for a number of years, but even that was not a paying gig. We all volunteered. Basically, it was a club, So it's never been a kind of. I never sought to make a living at it. It was always an avocation, even a bit of a mission, but it was just such a great love for it. Yeah. So to come back to your earlier question, Randall, the work that I did in that area, the first exploration was in Okinawan karate, and then Aikido. And then from there, I began to study Tai Chi. And my first Tai Chi lineage was the Chen lineage. I met this guy in Cambridge, Mass, who was in a bookstore, on Mass Avenue, in the heart of the square. And it was a guy. We started talking, and it turned out, he worked at the bookstore, but he was also studying and teaching Chen Sting style Tai Chi. So I started practicing with him, and I learned that form, that 37 form, basically, that he created for the U.S. And a little bit like painting by numbers, but but it was good. It was probably an important thing because, just recognizing his contribution of bringing Tai Chi into the United States, what he did. So, but then from there, I discovered Mantak Chia in New York. And so I went to a couple of his classes and workshops. He was teaching in Chinatown in New York City. He had a little acupuncture clinic there. And and he was also doing small classes there, And so I took a couple of classes. I was impressed with what he was teaching. He was teaching stuff I had read about or was interested in, very esoteric Taoist alchemy stuff that I had tried to read a couple of books in that genre, like The Secret of the Golden Flower and others, that are kind of classic Taoist esoteric alchemy texts. And they're not very readable. At least they weren't very readable to me at that stage. It's all like metaphor on metaphor, right? And so it's like digging for a bone in the ground. You got to be a dog that's like very committed. And I just didn't have that level of commitment. But Chia was teaching this stuff to Westerners in a Western language with Western tools. So I brought him to. It wasn't too long before I brought him to Cambridge, and I rented a room at the Harvard School of Education, close to Brattle Street. I forgot the name of that street, and about 70 people showed up for what I believe was the first seminar he ever did outside of New York, and and that on Taoist alchemy, and so. At that point, I got really interested, and so I kind of committed myself to working with him wherever I could. So I ended up traveling with him, and actually I helped him. I really taught him how to organize seminars, and I was the lead person, in a number of different cities where I had connections. And so we organized workshops then in the Bay Area and in New York and, a number of other places, certainly continuing in Boston.
Wow.
I had a big house in Boston, an old Victorian. The third floor I had opened up into a studio, and so could handle about 30 or 40 people, actually. And we started having group meetings there, and so I became his first senior instructor, I believe, and traveled with him. There's actually some stuff on the web where there's an interview where I talk a little bit about that history with him, where he was writing notes on Taoist alchemy on the backs of envelopes, sort of like the Gettysburg Address, and I would read the notes and then go practice, and I would confer with him and he would make corrections, and then we'd go on to the next one. So we would be hopping around from city to city. I'd be learning this stuff while I was teaching it in real time, kind of with him.
Holy cow.
I got to know his family, his brother, and, his extended family. And, it was sort of a little kind of adopted into the family, So that was,
she by the seat of your pants.
Yeah. on the fly or on the run, as it may be. So I stayed with him a bunch of years. I think it was probably close to 10 years. And then I got interested in going deeper into Tai Chi. He was teaching a form of Tai Chi, basically based on on the four gates, basically, or the three gates, basically, or the 13 movement form, basically, with the 5 directions and left hand and right hand and left hand, right side and left side. So it was an adaptation of a Wu style practice that he had learned from one of his teachers. And that was the extent of what he was teaching, but it was fine. It was a good drill. And actually, even to this day, I practice a form of that. If I'm traveling, I don't have a lot of room because it can be done in a very small area, and you're doing Peng Lu Zhi Yan, basically, in all the directions. And it's a very good practice, foundation practice, and so I'm a firm believer in the kind of axiom that even when you've had many years of experience, as all of us had, it's really good to do foundation practices. They say that Pablo Casals, the great cellist, practiced scales up to the end of his life, that every morning he would be practicing scales, so it doesn't get much more fundamental than that. So in the same way, I'm finding that even currently when I have limited time to practice, or if I'm in a small space, which I no longer am being out here, I mean, everything can be done outside here in Hawaii. I love it. But I still practice that. If I want to go deeper into more of a Neigong exploration of the form in terms of, sinking and releasing and kind of what's called in some circles kind of like the drum body, if you will, the kind of springing energy, discharging energy, along with, how that is manifest in different movements, particularly in the Graf Sparrow's Tales, or that particularly 13 movement sequence. That's a very good form or frame in which to practice that deeper level of, of kind of basically creating what I call sometimes creating the Tai Chi body, because I believe what we're actually doing when we're practicing Tai Chi or Bagua or Xingyi for that matter, or maybe a number of other lesser known internal forms, is if we're doing it properly, we're actually changing the landscape of our internal body. Basically, we're actually working on the level of the fascia and on the tendons and ligaments. And we're creating actually a different body. And so when we talk about the internal, it's not just the idea of internal, it's actually internal physical as well as energetic and, and mental as well, because the psychological, or not psychological, but actually the mindful aspect of the internal arts, which I think become more and more important the more you practice over time. When you develop a level of skillfulness with the forms and then you go beyond, what actually Bing Lee taught me this phrase, the skin level, basically, right, which is the choreography. If you go a little bit deeper, and you need to go deeper to the kind of bone level, and then the level of the fascia, and then sooner or later you come into the emotional body and the mind, and the whole idea of being able to soak the awareness into the body, basically. And so that's another level, and there is where the standing practices become really important, I believe, in terms of a curriculum. But I'm wandering a bit.
No, you're good, brother. You're good. Yeah. Wander.
Yeah.
So anyway, we began talking about my history, and so then we've landed here. So why don't we continue?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Owen.
No. I was just going to ask you. So, you started, once you'd been with Mantak for a while, and I believe you actually helped him organize and write some of his first books, didn't you?
Yeah,
I did. Actually, I wrote the intro to his book on his own self-published book, and then later on the microcosmic orbit and the male sexual energy book. Michael Wynn was more active than I was with regard to that editing and writing stuff, but I did play a role. And actually, his publisher was a friend of mine, an elderly man at that time. Now I'm an elderly man, but at that time, Felix Morrow was the first publisher of University Books, which was the first esoteric book publisher. And they were doing esoteric books by mail order. So he was publishing a lot of esoteric spiritual stuff and some martial things and so on. And he had been in the Gurdjieff work, which had been, a major influence in my life in terms of my inner life and spiritual work. And we had been together in the same group in New York. And I commuted between New York and Boston at that time during that work. And he had been an old, Russian Trotskyite, in the old days, and was very educated, a real, mainstream New Yorker, man, a Brooklyn guy, real New York. And sort of, like I said, a Marxist-Leninist Trotskyite character who had gotten into the Gurdjieff work very early. And so I introduced him to Mantak Chia. And so Felix actually, Felix came to, we met again at a workshop that either I organized or Chia organized, and we connected again after many years. And he commented to me at the time how different I looked. My body had changed. And that was because I had started, to do really intensive training in Qigong and Tai Chi. And so, my body began to, just the way I was talking about a few minutes ago, my body actually changed, So my bone mass improved, my, chest opened up. My legs got stronger, my flexibility improved, all that stuff. So he was really impressed. And so on that basis, I got him interested in Chia's work. And he ended up becoming a student of Chia's, and then his publisher. So, so Felix he died a lot of years ago, but he was sort of a legendary character in the publishing world, and particularly in the world of, spiritual and spirituality books of different types. So Buddhist, Taoist, Buddhist, Vedic, all kinds of things. So.
Yeah, it's when you said University Press, I'm like, oh yeah, I can think of a dozen books that I have in my shelves over there, that are University Press books. So,
yes. So anyway, so just continue a little bit here. So basically, I got interested in going deeper into the Tai Chi world, and that's when I discovered Jinsun Chu in Boston. Now, the Jinsun Chu lineage, he was one of three disciples of Yang Chengfu's eldest son, Yang Shaozhong, in Hong Kong. Yep. And that's a whole interesting story in its own right, because Yang Shaozhong, being the eldest son of Yang Cheng Fu more likely inherited much more of the family, bowl, if you will, than his two younger brothers, who weren't even really taught by Yang Cheng Fu very much anymore, if at all. So he taught his younger brothers a bit, as well as other teachers. And by the way, in that regard, the Tung family, which I have studied many years, Tung, the great grandfather, Tung Yingji, was very close with Yang Cheng Fu. He actually was a lead disciple of his, and so the Tung family, had developed in parallel, if you will, because Tung Yingji had actually been a student of house style before he met Yang Cheng Fu.
Right.
And so he brought the house style to the Yang family, actually. Ooh. And that's not that well known, but it's, I've been practicing the Tung family version of the house style now for a bunch of years. And it's a really extraordinary form. I consider it to be their small frame form, basically. More of an energetic and fighting frame than the 108 movement long form, which is, great in its own right, but it has a different purpose than the house style, which is much more condensed, much more focusing on bringing energy into the hands and into the back for Fajin and other applications. So it's very intensive. It's almost like it's more kind of explicitly almost like a Qigong kind of form, although it follows the Yang style sequences, but they're done differently.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, check it out online. There are some interesting house style. It's not that well known. House style actually gave rise to Sun style. So Sun Yat was, basically studied house style and then developed the Sun style based on the integration of Bagua Xingyi and what he learned from the Hao folks. So,
wow.
After some years, you get interested. Not everybody. I started. I'm far from a major history buff, but I have an interest in some of these historical connections. And particularly at a time when, for example, Yang Shaojun, Yang Chufu's eldest son, and Dong Huling, the son of Dong Yingji, would hang out together in Hong Kong and with other artists, and there would be a cross-fertilization of different styles and people learning from each other. It seemed like and they were still competitive, sure, and challenges all the time, but still there seemed to be a kind of a capacity for collaborating across lineages and across styles, and so, that doesn't happen that often these days, so you get a platform like the Yang style, main Yang style platform, and it's full of controversy and, all this negativity, man. It's like unbelievable. It's so much negativity and criticism, really, and, so it's, and trolling, like up the wazoo. So it's crazy making in that regard. But anyway, so I started studying, with Jin Sun then in Boston. And that particular lineage, he was one of the three students of Yang Chufu's eldest son, and who had three disciples, one in London, another in Hong Kong. And that lineage within the Yang tradition is not that well known compared to, the younger sons and who've kind of captured the market for Yang style, basically. For sure. But there is a remarkable video on YouTube of Yang Shaojun doing, the long form. It's quite grainy. There are some kind of, enhanced video versions of it that are more watchable. But his version of his interpretation, what he does, that style and the approach, and just it's really powerful, and you're really seeing Yang style, at its best, in my opinion, along, of course, with the Tung Family. So my current practice of Yang style Tai Chi integrates both elements. I'm trying to kind of pick the best of those, as well as what my own body is expressing at this stage of my life after so many years of practice. I think, all of us come to the realization that, you develop the Owen form, you develop the Gunther form, you develop the Randel form, basically. We follow the choreography and the sequence of the established forms, or we don't, but basically the way it's expressed is through our own body mind. And then it becomes an authentic expression rather than just copying, if you will, or staying at the form level, if you will.
Beautiful. Gunther, this is going back a little bit, but could you remember what a little bit like the class, how it was taught, and maybe the flavor of that Tai Chi? You've been talking about that a little bit, but could you elaborate on? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I got a number of stories, actually, very traditional. He understood English quite well, didn't speak much, which is also not unusual, Oh, by the way, I also had a short period of time through my friend, Don Miller. Don and I connected early on, and Don became, kind of legend in his own right in the Yang world. But at that time, he was studying with another student of Chen in Boston. They're also well known. I can't think of his name right now, but I took a few classes there, and that was a very traditional Chinese scene where, the tea kettle was brewing and he would be sitting reading a Chinese newspaper in the corner while people would be practicing. He'd get up occasionally, go and make a correction, go and sit back down, And so I didn't really like it that much. So that when I discovered Chin Sun and I learned about the lineage and the connection to Yang Xiaozhong, and then the way the training was actually done. So basically we would begin, each of us in different corners. This was down in Chinatown in Boston, basically doing what warm-ups or whatever time we'd get there. At a certain point, the bell would ring and we'd do the long form together, usually at a medium tempo. And then we would break up into different groups, whether we were studying weapons or, there was some interesting stuff with pole practice and then a drill, which I've never seen anywhere else done, which is basically a push hands drill. It's a power pushing using the G posture, basically, where two people are kind of facing off using G, the G movement in Tai Chi, and without trying to thrust the body forward and back to learn how to fa from that static position. Right?
Wow.
Now that ain't easy. And studying that in that context, in that center, you had to learn the hard way, which I did by injuring myself, not to use muscles primarily. No.
Right.
Of course, you have to use some muscles, but you really have to learn how to engage with the skeletal structure.
Yes.
In a way that forms a kind of dynamic, stability, if you will, or integration. Almost like I'm thinking of Bucky Fuller for some reason, like the Dymaxion. It's like a structure that has a structural integration in terms of how the tendons and ligaments, how the skeletal structure is organized, and that then allows you to become transparent enough to be able to to bring power from the ground, but it's not it's not a recoiling power. It's a different kind of power. It's a compression power and a release power. And so when you're standing that way with an opponent, basically in the practice drill, you're learning how to feel and sense where there are openings in their skeletal structure and in their mind, actually, where there's a gap, where there can be a momentary sinking and then releasing of the power into discharge. Now, Jensen would do this at a level of mastery that I've never seen since, and for example, as a beginning student, he would work with all the beginning students. Each of us would get a turn to stand with him. This was after I learned the form. I had to pay my dues, so the first year. But then he would start doing the power pushing with me, and as I was observing other people, he would throw them back, 4 or 5 feet against the wall. I guess at one point in their old studio, they had mattresses on the wall. So that's how they would practice their fajing that way, And this particular dynamic, static posture pushing, done at different heights and at different width stances and so on. But when he would do it to other people, most people would fly away. With me, he didn't discharge me, and I was trying to figure out what he was doing. And it took me a while because I'm a little slow at this stuff, but eventually I realized what he was doing was he was basically, sending his jinn into my body, into my feet, to teach me how to root the incoming force. Okay? But it was never described or conceptualized. You either got it or you didn't, right?
Yeah.
And so then when I would be practicing with other, Caucasians, right, or Asians, we were on the same boat because only Jin Sun and his son actually seemed to know what they were doing, unless you were a long-term student or an inner door student of them, And so I injured my shoulder. I, basically developed years later some severe osteoarthritis in my left shoulder, in my right shoulder, because of the power pushing, which was done incorrectly. It was only many years later, the last 2 years, that I've cycled back into the Yang Shoujun lineage by meeting a guy who actually, when he was in his 20s, was in Hong Kong studying with Yang Shoujun. So,
wow.
So I did some privates with him, and that was interesting to come back into the work that I had been doing back in the early 80s with Gibson at the school. So another story, for example, about the training method you asked me about, we would hold static postures for a period of time. So you would take something, for example, like ward off, or G, or on, or whatever it would be, right? Or splitting on it, whatever it would be. And you'd hold that posture for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It was a very classic way of teaching because apparently in the old days, most Tai Chi was taught that way. Before people put together the strings of the movements, the sequence, they would learn these individual postures and actually develop the Jin lines in their body to transmit the power or to absorb and then transmit. And so these standing postures would be a way of training the fascia and the Jin lines in the body that's my current interpretation of what they were doing, okay, based on stuff I've been doing in more recent years. So anyway, I was standing holding Pang, right hand Pang, ward off with right hand, and Jensen came around and he took his hand and he adjusted my lead right hand a few degrees forward, maybe like 2 or 3 degrees, so my hand would, can you see my hand angling here that way, right? Now, when he did that, I immediately felt a connection into my spine and into the scapula and into the spine. And then because I had already been practicing for a lot of years, I felt it go down into my feet. And I felt a momentary realignment of my skeletal structure, forming this kind of unified structure that I mentioned a few minutes ago by just simply angling my hand a few degrees forward. And what that did was it basically it turned my bone structure in a way that kind of, I don't mean, when I say locked in, I don't mean in a rigid way, but it formed a structure. The way I describe that sometimes is if you have a chain link and a loose chain link, and you're holding both ends of the chain. Now, if I turn one hand clockwise, the other clockwise, I create a momentary structure in that chain. The links form a a structure, right? And when I release it, they're loose again. So by just doing a slight twisting of the ends, you create a momentary structure of stability in that. And so that's a rough metaphor, analogy of what happens in the body when you make these minor adjustments. Now, he didn't say a word to me. He just did that. And again, you either got it or you didn't. It was a very traditional way of teaching, especially Caucasians at that time. Right. So, but I happened to get it because I had been practicing standing Qigong for some time. And I had kind of, through Chia's work, I had learned a bit about bone structure alignment. So, which is an authentic aspect of his teaching early on when he was teaching the simple drill work that I mentioned earlier, that Wu-style drill. But Chia was very good at that aspect of it. But it was, again, years later, being in, some years later, being in Jiu-Jitsu school where I had the ability to study. I studied with him for 4 years. And they were really important years because it gave me a direct, limited but direct understanding of what the Yang family, original family style was. Because, Yang Chaozhong, again, was the eldest son. And according to the person I mentioned earlier, who I met more recently a few years ago, he basically... as the eldest son, he basically didn't change anything in the form, basically. He basically held to what his father taught him. And along with a lot of other internal closed-door training methods, Neigong and Qigong methods, to develop the legendary Yang Luchan power, basically. So the Tung family have a lot of that, in my opinion as well, and so I'm looking forward to having some opportunities to get together with Chen Dong here. He's retired now, but he's still teaching a little bit. Hopefully, I'll be able to do some private classes with him, and we're friendly. He likes me. I like him. I think when he sees me, he's pleased that I'm at the age I am and still vertical and reasonably lucid and still loving the internal arts as I do, So.
Yeah, both you guys are good examples of what a lifetime practitioner can be.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I mean, I'm out, I think 5-6 nights a week now in a 5-minute walk to a wonderful park here. And I'm out practicing various steps, at sundown, and I'm loving it. Again, at warm weather, year round, perfect weather. It's a great place to practice. So I need to pick up a few. There are a few things I need to go back and pick up and relearn. I want to relearn the saber form, which I learned elements of years ago. I learned the Chen style saber, by the way, for a while, and I also studied Chen style along the way. You were asking me earlier about and that was initially, I learned that I was exposed to it through Bing Li. I never studied it with him because at the time I studied with Bing, he was teaching the Tung Family Yang style form, along with the Chen form that he learned from a teacher in Denver. I've forgotten his name, Bai Ping. He was an engineer, I believe, a Beijing Chen form, rather than a Chen village form. And so in the Boston school, the Tai Chi, and rather in the Boulder Tai Chi school, we studied initially the Chen village, Chen style. So, Chen, what's his name? Chen Sawang came a few times to the school. I also attended a workshop that he gave years earlier in Boulder that Mike Zingman had organized. Zingman had a connection to him as well as Bing. And but then I was introduced to a different to the Beijing Yang style because the founder of our school, Laura Ting, had studied with this Beijing practitioner, Tian, let's say they call it Tian at the moment, Tian family.
Yep.
And
I know who you're talking about.
The Tian family was one of the 6 disciples of Chen Fake, right?
Yep.
And so, there are videos of his uncle, basically, and of him. And he's a wonderful teacher. It's very different than the Chen Village approach.
Interesting.
Much more fluid and loose, and he's a happy guy, and I really enjoyed. We've been a really nice connection. So I learned that form, that version of the form, initially having learned the Chen Village version of that. So, and I still practice the first set of that, the first part of that, and I'd forgotten, I haven't practiced that actively, but I find that I enjoy the Chen style also. It's more athletic, more demanding in some ways. Again, it depends at how you practice, at what height you practice and at what length you practice, and there are a number of factors there, but that particular exposure and learning of that style, I liked. Again, I liked very much the Chen style. So I've been practicing both the Yang style and the first set, and not the cannon fist. I never learned that. I learned elements of it, but I didn't go further. And then the Chen sword, I learned a bit of the Chen sword through that. And and then along the way, through the Tung Family, I have been studying now the house style for a bunch of years, learning it primarily online and through some private online classes with Alex Tung, basically. And I have enough background now that, that I could, with periodic online or in-person corrections, I can learn the thing pretty much with video or online now.
Sure.
I just have enough awareness of the body mechanics and the energy flow, and at a certain while, your body knows what to do with this stuff, right? So it seems to be a natural expression for me. So you asked me about what it was like in the Boston school, and I gave you a couple of examples of that. The correction that he made with me, and some of the stuff in kind of the curriculum there. We also worked with heavy poles, basically, steel poles. Which was, and they did some use of, in Boston, at least with Jin Sun, so I think this was part of the Yang family training, was working with some weights too. So, and I remember doing some private classes with Mike Zygmunt, where he had me wearing a lead vest, basically, at one point, that he would use for training. I had never realized that before. And then I practice using hand weights or wrist weights a little bit, and I do form practice too, just to add that additional, weight, which I believe creates more, a little bit faster transformation of the qi into jing, a little faster. It creates it's more demanding, so it creates more attention and more skillful means in that way. So
it seems like.
By the way, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, please.
I was just going to mention as an anecdote, a few years ago, just before or a bunch of years ago, before COVID hit, I went actually and visited a class of Bing's in Boulder that he was doing at the synagogue out on Arapahoe, And I hadn't seen him in a lot of years, and we instantly reconnected. He introduced me to the whole school, as particularly my background with Timothy Leary and the whole psychedelic scene. So he kind of fixated on that, and then he invited me into the class, and so I was practicing some of the Chen drills he was doing, and then he used me as an example. Not like in the old days. Bing used to throw me around a lot.
Sure.
For some, he. Well, you know how good he is. He's extraordinary. So I was his yuki for a while. because I was just compliant and I enjoyed it. You learn a lot being in this role. So I could learn how to fall. Again, my Aikido background helped me there. It kept me safe in a number of instances in terms of slipping in winter and so on. But basically, as I reflect back on my history in the martial arts, it's been a very rich journey and continues to be. I've had the good fortune to work with some extraordinary teachers, in authentic lineages, both in the Yang family, the Tung family, and the Qian family in Beijing with the Chen style, and now learning the Hao style also, which is again the Tung family's version of it. Okay, which is a little different than some of the other Hao styles, but if you look carefully at some of the earliest video of Hao style, you see it's very, very close to what the Dungs are teaching. And so, they also call it a hard style and open and close. So it has different names, but it really emphasizes opening and closing of the fascia and the joints and the soft tissues. And it's done with a form of isometric tension, unlike the usual Tai Chi, long form is done. So you're actually activating, the fascia in the hands and the forearms, and then once you learn how to actually articulate and train the fascia a bit, you notice that when you activate, let's say, even the center of the palm, the whole body reacts, basically. The whole body becomes, you can feel the fascia in the whole body because, the classic thing about fascia is it's like a web, an elastic web that when you touch one part of it, it vibrates in another part, so that it has all these fibrous connections. So a different way of describing it is what I mentioned at the very beginning, kind of the feeling of a drum skin, basically, where you hit it with a baton and it bounces off. So that I think is the unique energy of the Yang style. Okay. It's different in Chen style. They don't work with that particular energy per se. It's available, but it's not focused. The Yang style, I believe, has this kind of, this dynamic drum skin effect, basically, And the Yang family's version of that, in terms of the static dynamic Jeep power pushing, is the most challenging expression of that, because you really can't move. You really got to do it internally, And so,
right? Yeah. That's a great way to say that. Yeah,
mobilizing. How to mobilize that without moving, or moving a lot. You have to move a little bit, but you can see, because you guys, you have the background, that ain't easy, man.
Nope. No, it is not.
The way we all learned, I believe, was that we learned how to recoil from the ground, right? The whole idea was like the physics principle, basically you push down on the ground and then recoil, it comes back up. Well, that's true at the level of crude power, of Li, what's called crude power, right? Sure, there is that, but that is not the highest expression of that kind of, of that fa, of that discharging energy, which is the elastic body, basically. So I came to that very late in my studies. I would say in the last 10 years, I sought for that a lot of time, but it was really hard to find people who would teach us stuff,
Right.
Years ago. When I started this stuff in the 60s. So, or I'm sorry, in the early 80s, basically, is when I started the Tai Chi. So I remember at one point, also I'm giving you examples from my history.
Please.
I was interested in iron shirt training, okay? Because Shia had taught a version of iron shirt, basically, and the standing posture, where basically you would, basically fill the tissues with a breathing practice to try to create a kind of pneumatic, protection layer in the fascia around the vital organs, starting in the abdominal area and the kidney areas. And then later, more advanced practitioners being able to go up into different parts of the body, presumably even the head and face. So there was a rumor that, that there were people who had developed this at a level where they could take punches to the face, basically, and you would bounce off like a rubber tire, an inflated tire. I never saw that. So I got interested in that. And Chia was teaching it not as a martial practice, but as a health practice. And along the way, I began to see how people were really getting into trouble doing that extremely yang style or yang energy work, using a fire breath and a filling practice of the tissues using, kind of compression and squeezing. And so, as you can imagine, it created a lot of yang energy, a lot of heat and fire that would, for some students, would get stuck in their chest, in their heart or lungs, and create what is known in Chinese medicine as running fire, which is a syndrome that is usually associated with martial arts that's incorrect, or Qigong that's trained incorrectly, where you haven't learned how to open up the energy flow and the microcosmic energy flow. You haven't learned how to establish how to circulate the energy to cool the body. Because if you're shooting energy up into the chest and head and heart, you're going to create an imbalance at the adrenal level and at the emotional level. And so people started to, have weird episodes. So I found myself at one point in working with Chia of having to change my role into trying to help them rebalance themselves. Because even their acupuncturists didn't know what it was, basically, because it was an unusual syndrome, basically.
Right.
It was basically a chi deviation, which call it chi deviation, but it comes from wrong practice. So I found myself having to teach people how to reopen their microcosmic or macrocosmic channel, how to sometimes put cold compresses behind the neck or at the bottom of the feet, just to try to bring their energy down out of their head and chest and heart, causing arrhythmias and other issues. So, but I got interested from a martial standpoint. So I tried to find other people who would teach me the iron shirt. And I found this strange guy in Chicago named Gary Kleiman. And Gary had been a student of Wei Sim Lao in Chicago.
Yeah, I know Wei Sim Lao. Yeah.
Right. So he had been one of his, 6 or 8 students in the old days learning the so-called temple style Tai Chi, which, by the way, I also have never seen anywhere else, that particular style, but extremely martial. And Gary was like a loaded pistol, basically. He was explosive, angry a lot, very ideological, very, neurotic. At the same time, he had a big heart and very good at what he did. Really had developed a real high level of iron shirt. He could take punches pretty much anywhere on his body except his head. So I finally tracked him down and flew out to Chicago actually to study with him. And so he charged me $2,000 to learn, for one afternoon or 2 afternoons of practice. Basically, it was a heavy toll, but that was kind of the going rate for like martial arts secrets, at the time. Not unusual,
Sure.
In any of these lineages. If you want to get the, assuming you have the talent and the commitment and the sustained motivation, and you're lucky. And you get accepted as an inner-door student, it's very expensive, too, financially, because you're in a kind of disciple role where you're basically supporting your teacher. to live, basically, so it ain't cheap. So, there are stories of Yang Xiaozhong in Hong Kong, living in an apartment complex, in downtown Hong Kong. And he had this little sliding thing at his door. And people would come from all over the world, to try to study with him. They'd usually have to get, a red letter of invitation because he wouldn't take people off the street.
Right.
He'd only take people for the most part who were really, teachers or advanced students or of his own, or later on his daughters, who, by the way, have still carried the tradition in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
His two daughters, So, unless they've passed on, but I think Mary, one of his daughters, is still teaching. But anyway, he had this little sliding thing, and so he would he'd knock on the door, the story goes, and he'd open the slider and he'd check you out, kind of check your vibe out. And if you didn't like it, he'd shut the shutter and keep the door locked, So,
That's it.
I like it. No soliciting. No soliciting.
So he never had a commercial orientation. So that may be a reason that he's not that well known, even in the Yang lineage, the different lineages. He's sort of, I wouldn't say forgotten. The people who really know the art really know who he is and how important he is. But in terms of kind of widespread adoption of that particular approach, the Jinsen School still is in Boston. His two sons run it, and they've carried on that lineage. I don't think they're teaching the power pushing anymore, or if it is, it's only to a few select, more advanced students. When I was there, he was teaching it to anybody, And apparently, before I got there, based on the information I got from this guy that I mentioned, who had been a student of Jinsen's and then went to Hong Kong to study with Yang Xiaozhong with Jinsen's intro. In other words, Jinsen provided him with an intro to Jinsen's own teacher.
Oh, wow.
Xiaozhong, which is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So he went to Hong Kong and he was taken into the family and basically was, there was even talk of an engagement with one of the daughters to bring, that lineage back to the U.S. Right?
Wow.
And that didn't work out.
Yeah.
But this guy has given me some really interesting stories about time he spent with Yang Xiaozhong and how remarkable he was, and what he taught. And so it was, again, very traditional training, not for everybody. Yeah. But when I compare, and again, comparisons are what they are, usually in the eye of the beholder. But when I look at that video, that grainy video that I suggested you look at, and you look at some of the other current, incarnations of Yang family style, there's a world of difference, actually, in terms of what's being conveyed visually. Even in that grainy film, you can get, if you can use a video viewer that slows it down, not frame by frame, but if you can slow it down, you see some extraordinary, stuff going on there. I would say also the Tung Family videos, especially my favorite is Dung Hu Lin, but there are good videos of Dung Yingji as well.
Yep. I've seen some of those for sure.
Yeah. And so overall, I feel very blessed to have met them. I was introduced to them by Bing Li, who had been studying with Chen Zhong's elder brother, Dun Kaiying, in L.A., basically. So that's another branch of the Dung family. So I had actually done a couple of, through Bing, I had done a couple of seminars with Dun Kaiying in the Denver area where he came out. And I think there was also a Dun Kaiying school in Colorado. I'm not sure, not in Denver, somewhere else.
Was it, I've got three places that it might have been, Gunther. It might have been either Aspen, Grand Junction, because there's some good Tai Chi people over there. And I can't think of it. Was it Durango? Maybe Durango.
Area? I think it may be.
That's it. Yeah.
No, not Durango. North of Denver. What's it?
Fort Collins?
Like Westminster?
I think Fort Collins.
There you go.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. In Eagle, it's actually the Tung family. There's a teacher there who I introduced to the Tung system when I was living in the Aspen Valley. And he's now teaching. He lives in Eagle. He's teaching there. He's a certified instructor in the Tung family.
Huh. Oh, wow.
I'm not.
Oh, cool.
I'm not. I've been a gadfly in the Tung family, coming in and out. So, but I've never sought discipleship or, I had enough of that at a certain point, So,
yeah.
But I really admire and respect that family and what how they're continuing now into four generations. And Alex has been doing a really good job of bringing it worldwide. He's got schools in Greece and in Italy and France and England, and he's traveling a good portion of every year, really teaching that. He's brought his great grandfathers. He has a whole website devoted to Dunying Ji, basically. So he's actually taken a different approach than his own father, who has done a lot more of the changing of the form, in my small ways. But what Alex has done is he's stayed very much with what he perceives Dunying Ji actually did, based on the videos that are still available.
Sure.
So,
wow.
There's actually a video on YouTube that shows the two generations or three generations of the Tung family in the form. And you can see the slight differences there. And again, they're a reflection of age, of body type, of experience, But my favorite, again, the kind of benchmark for me, my all-time favorite Tai Chi video is Dung Buling doing. He's got 2 or 3 videos, and again, it's so beautiful. It's, as I said earlier, it's such an expression of the kind of marriage of the martial and civil. The different aspects of Tai Chi, both the martial and the philosophical aspects of it. So it's very inspirational. I find I look at it. Every time I look at it, I'm, especially when we're slowing it down or speeding it up, it's a remarkable document, actually, really worth looking at. So
I was going to ask, you have this deep background in Yang style Tai Chi. You had this deep experience in Chen Tai Chi. If you were to sort of contrast the two, like in a big way, what would you say the differences are? And maybe what attracted you to each, or what do you find attractive about each?
Sure. Yeah.
I like the explosive aspect of Chen style. I like the variation of the slow and fast. I like the emphasis on spirals as opposed to circles. Okay? And there's an important difference there. I like the kind of martial intent that is expressed in the form itself, which doesn't have to kind of be added in. The form itself kind of expresses that. So those are some of the things I really like about it. Of the list of things I just mentioned, I think the martial spirit and the spiraling are the things that I like the most, that I feel have been most beneficial, and things that have actually kind of, through a kind of osmosis, have leached over a little bit into my Yang style. I bring a little of that in, And so,
that's cool.
Yeah. So the Yang style, I think the Yang style is easier to teach, easier to learn, and therefore I think it has a wider base, for example, for teaching ordinary people who just want to, kind of exposure or some exercise, which is fine. It becomes more of like a meditative movement, and it has some health benefits, although frankly, and this may be a bit heretical, but I don't think it really has more health benefits than just doing good old exercise, Western exercise, if you're not doing Tai Chi correctly. If you're just waving your arms around and, kind of moving from one form to another, I don't think it has a lot of benefit health-wise.
Sure.
However, if you actually are bringing to the form what the form offers you, if you know what you're looking for, and if you know how to mobilize that, then it's self-benefits magnified. Okay. So, but that requires a different level of expertise and commitment to learn that, So within the Yang style, again, I like that it's a platform for people that can enter at different levels of entry. I like especially in the long form, the kind of relaxation and the opening of the joints and the kind of and the blood and chi circulation that it creates. I like that form itself is demanding and can be done in different ways, again, at different heights, at different speeds, with a different intent. I was just talking about that the other night on a Zoom class that I'm taking here with one of the Gong senior instructors who I've never met. I haven't met him yet, even though he lives in Honolulu. I'm spending most of my time over here on the East Coast. If I never had to step into Honolulu again, I would be fine.
Yeah, that's a tourist trap, brother. That is a tourist trap. Yeah.
But anyway, Chip. Chip. His name is Chip. So he's a historian of Yang family. So his website has a lot of really interesting stuff. And so this is a class for other teachers and advanced students that he's let me join. And
we'll have to get a hold of him sometime, maybe.
Oh, sure. Happy to introduce you, So he's a wealth of knowledge of the Yang family. So he's traveling right now for 2 or 3 weeks. I'll introduce you guys. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so he's very knowledgeable. He was one of Dung Hu Ling's senior students. Okay.
Okay.
But before, I think maybe even before, Dung Chen Dung came. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think, but certainly, and he's in his 70s, late 70s. So he's one of 2 or 3 people that are still alive who were Dung Hu Ling's students. So I had known about him for years. I actually had met him many years ago at a Chendong workshop here in Kailua, actually in Kaneohe, a town next to us here, that I attended years ago with Chendong. And I'd met him there, and also another colleague of his who had been who was very good at push hands, who was a student of Dung Hu Ling's. And Dung Hu Ling was known as a fighter. He was always being challenged. So he would always hold up very well, against Thai boxing, against, there was no mixed martial arts at that time, but he was tested by people in karate, by Thai fighters, by all kinds of. The Dung family actually has a quite big exposure in Thailand and in Malaysia, actually. They had a good exposure there. So anyway, coming back to your question, so those are the things I like about the 2 different approaches. The house style is interesting. It's kind of in a class by itself, and I like it because it's so internally focused on building the jin in the body. So it's almost to me like a closed door practice for training the power, jin power in the body.
Wow.
But it's a form, and it follows the sequence I said earlier of the Yang form. It just looks different. It's done differently, So, for example, like the opening move, you're going out this way.
Yeah.
You're going out this way, and then you're opening this way and closing this way, and then you cut in. So this is, Pang Lu Jian energies, the way they're expressed, for example. So, we start, this is like Pang, this is Lu, this is Ji, and this is An, okay? So, that's that's the house style version of Tang, Lu, Ji, An. So,
right.
But so every time you're doing this movement, you're squeezing. It's like an isometric squeezing of the soft tissue in the whole body. And so one of the ways the Tung family has described is hard Tai Chi. Okay? So because and when you do that, you have to kind of open and close within a framework that is itself more tense or more not tense. It's more filled than normal Tai Chi. Right? So you're very conscious here as you're coming out this way. You're opening, closing, opening. I'm exaggerating with my face now, so you can see that in my eyes. Opening, closing. So and you're doing that throughout every movement, and the movements they're a smaller frame, in a more condensed and in a more vertical posture, the way Wu style is. And so to me, it's. I think it became according to according to some of the stories I've heard, Dung Yingji introduced it into the Yang family, or the Yang family knew. Again, as I said earlier, these different lineages were all interconnected. So the actual house style was started by a Yang family. It has Yang and it has Chen influence in it as well. So there's some moves in the house style that look like a Chen style movement, So it's anyway. It's a really interesting form, not that well known, but I'm really enjoying it. So when I do a nightly practice, I'll generally do about 30, 40 minutes of Qigong and loosening, and then I'll do one or two sets of the long form, and I'll vary that according to what I'm feeling at the time. Sometimes I'll just go through it in a very relaxed, loose way, kind of carefree way, right? Just like playing at it, right? And that's relatively fast and loose. And other times it's much more yi, much more intense. I have a way of practicing, for example, that I learned from Alex Tung, which is to feel as if my body is like swollen with energy, like Michelin tire man, kind of, So you're going through the practice with that feeling of everything being inflated and filled, So that's an interesting way of practicing. And then at different heights. So whatever I'm feeling like at the time or when I've been doing that week, I'll practice that way. And then I'll often do the first, sometimes second set of the house style. And that, again, that brings a lot more energy. And so I like to be loose for that, so that I'm not too tense, because there's finding that kind of point in the house style where there's tension, but it's not too tense, right? Because you don't want to go overboard with it either. So you want to find kind of the sweet spot in that.
Sure.
So, but it's at a higher level of intentionality and not intent, at a higher level of, I'm using the word tense, but that's not really what I'm trying to say. It's tonus. Okay, can I use that word?
Tone. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, It has that feeling, right? So it's easy when you increase that tone to become too stiff.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the risk at that point, right? So, so it requires a fairly high level of understanding of your own body and your own system to know where that point is, so that you're not going overboard with it,
Right.
So I think that could actually increase your blood pressure and not be healthy for you, So,
oh, sure. I was going to ask, there's I think at least in my own practice, as time has gone along, I've noticed that my emphasis, and I think you'd sort of alluded to this before, but my emphasis has sort of grown and developed as I've sort of grown and developed as a person, and that these arts have also sort of helped me to grow as a person, sort of mentally and emotionally. But like, it's interesting. I like the way you were talking about like using the engagement around the mind, or the quality of the mind to sort of influence your practice, or to sort of, to play in different ways inside of the practice. Is that, and I think you had mentioned Alex in there giving you sort of the Michelin Man concept, but is that idea something that you've sort of develop on your own along the way, or is that something that you've gotten from your teachers, sort of this qualitative mind piece, and then how to engage it with your practice?
I think both. With Alex, there was that very specific suggestion. And then he said, and he's told me on another occasion, he said, practice different ways. He said, it'll keep it, he described it keeps it more interesting. Okay.
Sure.
Now it does that, but it also does a lot of other things. And when I said both are influences, both my own experience, because again, from my standpoint of spiritual practice, any technique or any practice can become stale when it's repeated in a mechanical way, and then it loses its benefit. It just becomes ritualized and mechanical, and
right.
So if you're working with mindfulness practices or practices around presence awareness, you look to different, what we used to call in the Gurdjieff work, alarm clocks, different things that wake you up, so that you can restore the moment, if you will. That's an odd way of saying it, but you come back into the moment.
Yeah,
which is no longer the moment. You call it the moment, but but in other words, it's a way of deconstructing, the conceptual apparatus, basically, being able to access, moment to moment awareness presence. So there are various, alarm clocks, tools, techniques you can use to do that. We used to, these are things we learned. I learned in the Gurdjieff work. Like, for example, when I get up in the morning, I put instead of wearing my watch, I'm left-handed, so I wear my watch in my right hand. I put my watch in my left hand. And every so often I realize that's my left hand. That reminds me to take a moment to stop and kind of power of now practice, if you will, right? So, or sometimes changing which leg I put into the pants leg first. Which is a habit we all do, right? Or basically, when I sit down to eat, to take a moment before I eat, take a few moments before I eat, which, could be viewed as a form of saying grace, kind of from a religious standpoint. But I think the intentionality behind that originally was to, basically to use eating as a kind of sacred ritual for entering presence, right? And so it was another opportunity, and so in the, in different religious traditions, whether it's in Catholicism or Christianity and Judaism, we have different prayers that are used in Orthodox Judaism, which I don't practice, but in Orthodox Judaism, there are prayers for almost anything you do in daily life, because the whole fabric of daily life is viewed as a sacred practice. Everything we do, every physical movement, every action, every act, every thought basically has a, potential spiritual component to it, right? So an opportunity. So I learned in that context how to vary things and change things. So that was part of my, upbringing, or in my spiritual work. But in the martial arts, I think it was probably Alex who pointed that out to me first. Quite a few years ago, he said, "Play with it, Gunther. Try different ways of playing with it, and seeing what happens. It'll keep it more interesting." That was his.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic advice in terms of, because, as you know, it's like when you have something you've been practicing for decades and decades, it's like you are trying to find new ways to engage with it, or new ways to be creative with it. So it does stay interesting. So
I've been practicing, for example, making small changes, for example, like in this movement, coming out of say a lower punch, then coming into this thrusting movement.
Mm-hmm.
You see pictures of Yang Chifu in this posture. This is like a freeze frame from this movement.
Yeah.
So varying the size of that, varying the sequence. I've been changing, for example, how I practice some kicks. I can't kick as high as I used to by any means now. I'm 89.
Sure.
I can't go down as low in the Snakes Creeps down as I could, so not that many years ago. So I'm adjusting my practice to what my body is able to do now. And I don't want to injure myself.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky. I've never, other than the horrific shoulder that came from malpractice of the power pushing, I've never had any issues or injuries with knees or ankles or, I've never had any, I've had, some bruises from, sparring and stuff, but, that's just nothing, and sore muscles are just part of the game. But, I remember with some of Bing Lee's camps where, we would be working like, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours in the evening. I could barely walk up and down steps. My quads were hurting so badly. They were so tight, because he would practice. He would have us practice low postures and, repeating and also holding postures for long times. And, you've studied, he's tough. I mean, he's a tough teacher. Quite a character too. I enjoy him. That he's never gone into a commercial scene with his art too. He's always been very respectful of the art, and he's very outspoken. I mean, he's very opinionated about different things.
Very true.
So I've found, at times, we've had some, gentle arguments about that, but if I were still living in the Boulder area, I left our Tai Chi school when COVID came. I didn't go back. So I've been pretty much practicing on my own now, and
sure.
So, but if I'm going to look to see if there are 2 or 3 people of Chendong teaching here in the area, but I don't know. I'm just going to see if I want to reconnect with some classes or just probably just do some private classes and things, here and there at this stage. So.
Yeah. Well, Randel, we got any more questions?
I do have one.
Yeah,
I know. I could talk to you for hours.
I really could.
One. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to have you back on the show, Gunther.
I love it.
Happy to do so.
Yeah.
So here's my last question. So the Tung family lineage is a variation of Yang family, and it's its own cookie, right? And then you worked with our Boston crew that had a really rare but rich Yang style. What are some of the things and characteristics between the Dong family and then that system that you don't see a whole lot in the mainstream Yang systems? Is it more of the Gong practices? Is it emphasis on more principles? Are they better, are those methods that you learned better, maybe weapons, or just looking at the system as a whole deeper? What would your opinions on that be, Gunther?
I have different opinions on different aspects of that. Okay. So, for example, as far as the philosophical, conceptual framework, I think they're about equal that way. They borrow from each other, or certainly, the Dong version is based on Yang Chifu's 13 principles, but they have their own version of that, okay, which is a reflection of some of their biases, if you will, or what that family has come to on its own. I think the current versions of the and it have been for quite a few years, of the, let's say, of the Tung family and of the current Yang methods, not the Yang Changzhung's lineage, is that the Tung family is more martial in its orientation. But it also offers, I noticed I went to a workshop here in February when Alex was coming to visit his family and his father. He offered a workshop I attended, and there were a lot of older people and a lot of women, have no interest in the martial thing at all. So they catered it as well. I think the two lineages are so closely interrelated. As I said, when I mentioned the Chen Dong at a workshop I did in Maui a few years ago with him, that I had been studying with Jensen in Boston, he really, he got very interested. He knows that family. Alex told me that on one of their visits to the East Coast, because there's a Chendong school, there was a Chendong school in Rhode Island, that they stopped in Boston and visited, Jensen School, out of respect for how the two families go back in terms of multiple generations, So there's definitely a respect and appreciation there. And I remember seeing a photograph not long ago of Dong Ling and Yang Xiaozhong and one other practitioner, a different lineage, I think a Wu practitioner. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question.
You're doing fine, brother. Yeah, it's good.
So, but I would just say that I have found the elements of both of them to be suitable for my temperament and what I enjoy. So, for example, these are subtle differences, for example, but in the Yang Xiaozhong version, the body is more squared off to the front, okay, on some of the moves, okay. And then in the Yang family, in that version of it, going back, is known for its repulsive power. It's discharging repulsive power. So this power pushing that I mentioned earlier, when I was a bit about, is an example of that. So, they're known for their ability to penetrate and repulse. Okay, explode basically. Now so that I like that particular aspect of the the Yang Xiaozhong version of the Yang family. I think there's actually in some ways more of a difference. I'm just coming to this now in this moment as I'm reflecting on some videos. There's probably more a closer connection of the Yang Xiaozhong and the Tung family Tai Chi form than there is within the Yang family, its current generation, and Yang Xiaozhong.
That's what I was going for, brother. That's kind of what I was picking out of you. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Because if you make a study, if you go and you're motivated to go online, look at that video that I mentioned. Okay, there are a handful of other videos of Jinsun students who are, again, that part of that lineage, older ones. There's a guy in New York who runs basically a version of that lineage. Very good. It's very martial, very propulsive. There's the daughter in Hong Kong. There was a very high-ranking karate guy, John Conroy, in Boston at the school when I was there, who was just, he had kind of graduated from school, had his own school in Rhode Island. He was a senior student of Jinsun, and then Jinsun sent him, along with my friend, to Hong Kong to meet with his teacher. And he was a very high-ranking karate guy and really big, strong, heavyweight guy. he became very, very high-level indoor student of Mary Yang, the Yang Xiaozheng's eldest daughter. So there are a handful of those people teaching, but again, for me, if you look at the video of Yang Xiaozheng and let's say, Dong Huling or Alex Dong or Dong Yunji, I would say particularly of Dong Yunji, for example, and Yang Xiaozheng, and to some extent Dong Huling and Yang Xiaozheng, they seem to be closer than what I'm seeing, what my eyes are seeing with the current Yang family leadership. And what's really known internationally now as the so-called official Yang family form, right? Yeah. Now there are variations within that as well.
Sure, yeah.
So I've forgotten his name. There's a guy in England who's a Yang family student of one of the younger sons. It's quite good. He's quite good. And so probably, at the end of the day, I think it probably comes down to the question of one's talent, one's dedication, one's karma, and just what one puts into that, the 10,000 hours, if you will. Yep. Yeah. Now, having said that, I've learned over the years that there are shortcuts, but those shortcuts, they're not shortcuts. You still have to practice a hell of a lot. But there are ways of accelerating the internal development. But those are a whole class of teachings that are, kind of Neigong, Tai Chi Neigong practices, which until quite recently have been pretty much hidden. Okay?
Right. Very secret.
And now they're starting to come out more. And so, there's a guy named Damo Mitchell. Or you interviewed Damo Mitchell.
Yeah, we've had Damo on the show. He's great.
Yeah, I love Damo's work. I think he, to me, he is the best exponent of the current, the integration of Taoist spirituality and martial, and medicine. He does the best job of that. I think he does a far better job than Mantak Chia ever did on that, frankly. And having been a senior student of Mantak Chia, I'm entitled, I guess, to say that. So,
yes, you are.
But I think that, he's superb, basically. I've actually been, I took his online course, his weekly classes online on some of the Neigong and some of the, his Tai Chi lineage. The one he's teaching now is came from Master Huang, who was a senior student of Chen Manqing in Malaysia, who was he was a practitioner of I think of white crane for years.
Oh, sure. Huh.
And then he moved into Tai Chi studying with Chen Manqing and also very martial. But he has a series of practices called loosening exercises, which I've incorporated into my regime, into my warm-ups, which not only loosen and open the joints, but at a deeper level of practice, which I learned from Damo, start working with the sinking and the releasing of the energy very rapidly, so that it becomes almost later on a micro movement inside the body that can discharge, and so that was, at least from my view, Master Huang's approach to teaching that. Now, he had a background in Chinese medicine and white crane, so seeing white crane work, there has some close similarities to Tai Chi, actually, and they both may have an antecedent form. Damo talks about a long fist form, an esoteric long fist form. Some training methods of which he teaches that I studied. And those are the ones that are designed to create the Jin lines in the body. And they're versions of the Panlu Jian, or the 8 gauge. They're versions of all 8 energies, but they're done in a static posture.
Yeah, he's mentioned that on the show, I think. Yeah,
they're done in a high level. You hold the posture, and you're sweating bullets. Okay, it's very demanding, but you can feel how if you do that exercise. Let's say, for example, the Peng. Okay, the way he teaches the Peng. So he'll emphasize you're standing closer. You're standing more tall. Your feet are narrower. You're not necessarily in the in the bow stance. Your arm is not at chest level with a tie. You're relaxing your shoulder. You're raising this. You are twisting the arm out, which rotates the scapula connection that I mentioned earlier in the program. Yeah. You're feeling as if this arm is being lifted. And the left hand is pressing down, like or squeezing into let's say into a resistant foil or coil, and so when you're practicing that in ward off, it looks vaguely like ward off in the form, but it isn't. It's this long fist form that he teaches and so I was practicing that for a while, and I noticed when I would do that and hold that posture for 10 or 15 minutes is about all you can do with that at the mat. It's so demanding. I mean, I'm sweating bullets, I said earlier, but you can begin to feel, for example, like how the Peng is increased incredibly from that, And you can feel like how the energy is being converted into the jun in the tissues, right?
Wow.
So when you're doing Lu, for example, roll back, and you're holding this posture, and again, there are a series of instructions for each one of these that are very specific. You can feel across the chest line, there's a line of energy that doesn't correspond to the acupuncture meridians. It's a completely different system. But you can feel how that line of the energy, right, connecting, the right hand and the left hand as you're doing rollback, how that really helps you, redirect your opponent's force, not simply in a way that simply shunts it aside, but really throws it also.
Right.
Sure. So you're bringing more than the so-called kind of passive, yielding to it. There's much more to it than that. But the passive yielding is just a kind of the interpretation of it from looking at the form. But when you practice this particular drill, so there are drills I practice the drills for Peng, Lu, Ji, and An. I practice those 4. And I found that over time that, they actually, I felt more natural power arising when I would do the form. But he says, don't confuse the two. Don't do the form with those postures. Keep them in separate buckets. He was very clear about that.
Yeah. So, we'll have to pass on the positive message to him. We'll let him know.
He's a very interesting character. His background, as you know from the broadcast, his father was still teaches Tai Chi, and so he's very ethical. He's very, responsible. He's got a very dry sense of humor.
Yeah,
it does.
I don't care for his taste in music, but that's
hopefully, I'm not going to say when, but he's reached out to me, and I think I know. I'm not going to say when again, but he's going to be in Colorado here within the next year, and hopefully Owen and I get to take him out for some snarfs and maybe out for a whiskey, and we'll mention the show.
Please do. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Thank you so much, Gunther. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad we finally got to put it together and meet you and just talk about your martial experience in depth. I've just had a great time. So thank you so much.
Likewise, my friend. It was a pleasure. Gunther, have a blessed day.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. And I just want to mention, Owen, that the time that I spent with you in the Bagua class was really important. I failed to mention that earlier, but the only reason I left at the time was I just couldn't handle the grappling.
Oh yeah.
I was already 70 years old.
Yeah.
So it was more. I did the best I could. I didn't do too bad actually at the time, but
no.
It was not something that I felt that I should invest in. And risking. So,
sure.
I still do practice. I do some simple, palm changes and. And I worked with Bing a little bit here and there over the years. So,
that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Damo has a whole set on Bagua too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's got some really good stuff. So.
Yeah. Okay, guys, can I get a copy of the interview with Damo? Can I?
Oh yeah, I'll send that to you. Yeah,
I'll send that to you right after we get off here.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And send me this one when it's convenient.
Yeah, of course. When we put it up, no problem. Yep.
Can I download it from Outbox or from Dropbox?
Let me see what I can do. I might be able to send you the file before we put it up. So yeah, so you can check it out. Okay.
Oh, there's no rush. So do what you need to do for yourself first. So. Okay.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Thanks,
then I'll for sure send it. Thanks again.
Okay.
Right on,
Have a blessed one.
Appreciate it.
Later.
Bye-bye.